The rifle blast echoed through the evening air as Winona Parker jerked upright in her bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. She reached instinctively for the loaded shotgun propped against her nightstand, a necessity for a widow living alone with 3 children on the edge of the Wyoming Territory in 1876. Another shot rang out, followed by the distant sound of hoofbeats growing louder by the second.
Nana.
8-year-old Sadie appeared in the doorway, clutching her tattered rag doll, her eyes wide with terror. Someone's coming. Winona was already on her feet, pulling a shawl over her nightgown. Wake Thomas and Lily. Get under the bed, all of you. Don't come out until I call for you. She moved swiftly through the small cabin she'd shared with her late husband Daniel for the 5 years before typhoid had taken him the previous winter. The wood floor creaked beneath her bare feet as she positioned herself by the window, the cold metal of the shotgun familiar in her trembling hands. The approaching rider was moving fast. Too fast for someone with innocent intentions, especially at this hour. Since Daniel's death, Winona had endured her share of unwanted attention from men who saw a young widow with prime farmland as easy pickings. Some had offered marriage with transparent designs on her property. Others hadn't bothered with such pretenses. She squinted through the darkness. The rider was slumped forward, barely staying in the saddle. His horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, thundered into the yard, its sides heaving, foam flying from its mouth. The man atop it was clearly injured. As the horse slowed, he slid sideways and hit the ground with a dull thud that made Winona wince. For a long moment, she stood frozen, the shotgun trained on the motionless figure. She could leave him there. By morning, he might be gone, either moved on or dead from whatever wounds he carried. It wouldn't be the first time she'd turned away strangers. The children hadn't truly trusted anyone since their father died, and Winona herself had grown wary of the desperate men who drifted through these parts. But something, perhaps the memory of Daniel's kindness to strangers, or maybe just her own stubborn refusal to let a man die on her property, propelled her forward. "Stay hidden," she called softly to the children, then unlatched the door and stepped onto the porch, shotgun still ready. The stranger lay face down in the dirt, one arm twisted beneath him. Blood darkened his shirt along his left side. His hat had fallen off in the fall, revealing thick dark hair streaked with dust. The horse stood nearby, still breathing hard but now watching her with wary eyes. "Mister?" Winona called, keeping her distance. "Can you hear me?" He groaned, shifting slightly. "Help," he managed, his voice barely audible. "Please." Winona hesitated, then propped her shotgun against the porch rail, still within reach. She approached cautiously and knelt beside him. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30 or so, with a strong jawline shadowed by several days' growth of beard. "What happened to you?" she asked, gently rolling him onto his back. His eyes fluttered open, startlingly blue against his sun-darkened skin.
"Shot," he gasped.
"Ambushed. 5 miles back."
"Who shot you?"
"Men. After the gold." Winona's stomach clenched. Gold meant trouble. Always had, always would. "What gold?" But his eyes had already closed again, his breathing shallow.
"Nana."
Sadie's small voice came from the doorway. "Is he dead?" "Get back inside," Winona ordered, but it was too late. All 3 children had emerged onto the porch, their faces pale in the moonlight. Thomas, at 10 the oldest and most like his father, stepped forward. "We should help him, Mama." Pa would've. Lily, 6 years old and painfully shy since Daniel's death, clung to her brother's nightshirt, her wide eyes fixed on the stranger. Winona sighed. "Thomas, fetch water and clean cloths." "Sadie, get the medicine box from the top shelf." "Lily, bring a blanket. We'll bring him inside, but remember," she fixed each child with a stern look, "we don't know this man. Stay back from him, understand?" The children nodded solemnly, and scurried to their tasks while Winona assessed the wounded stranger. He was tall and powerfully built, making it impossible for her to move him alone. "Thomas," she called, "when you fetch the water, I'll need your help." Between the two of them, they managed to half-drag, half-carry the unconscious man into the cabin and onto the small settee in the main room. Blood soaked his left side, and Winona carefully cut away his shirt to reveal a nasty bullet wound just below his ribs. "Is he going to die, Mama?" Lily whispered, clutching her blanket to her chest rather than offering it. "Not if I can help it," Winona replied, though she wasn't entirely confident. The wound was serious, but the bullet appeared to have passed through cleanly. If infection didn't set in, he might survive. She worked through the night, cleaning and bandaging his wound, forcing water and willow bark tea between his lips when he briefly regained consciousness. The children, despite her orders to return to bed, curled up on the floor nearby, watching with wide, solemn eyes. Dawn was breaking when the stranger's fever finally broke. His eyes opened, clearer now, and fixed on Winona as she bathed his forehead with a cool cloth. "Thank you," he murmured. "Most folks would have left me out there." "I considered it," she admitted. A faint smile touched his lips. "Honest woman." "What's your name, mister?" Thomas asked, edging closer despite his mother's warning glance. The man's gaze shifted to the boy. "Colton Reed."
I'm Thomas Parker.
"That's my mama, and those are my sisters, Sadie and Lily." He pointed to where the girls huddled together in the corner. "Are you a real cowboy?" Colton's smile widened slightly. "Something like that." "What about the gold?" Winona asked, keeping her voice low. "Are men following you?"
The smile vanished. "Probably."
"I should go. You're not going anywhere with that wound," Winona said firmly. "Not today, at least." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "I won't bring trouble to your door. Give me till nightfall to rest. Then I'll be on my way." Winona wanted to protest that he'd be in no condition to travel by nightfall, but part of her was relieved at the thought of him leaving soon. The children had already lost too much. She couldn't risk them becoming attached to another person who would inevitably disappear from their lives. "Nightfall," she agreed. "Until then, rest. Children, let's give Mr. Reed some peace." She herded them toward the kitchen area, but Colton's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Parker," he called softly. "Your husband.
Is he
Dead," she finished for him. "Almost a year now. Typhoid." Something like understanding passed across his features. "I'm sorry." Winona nodded curtly and turned away. She didn't need his sympathy, and she certainly didn't need to notice how his blue eyes seemed to see right through her carefully constructed defenses. The day passed with Colton drifting in and out of sleep. Despite Winona's warnings, the children were fascinated by their visitor. Thomas peppered him with questions whenever he was awake, and even Sadie ventured closer as the hours passed. Only Lily remained distant, watching from behind furniture or doorways, never speaking. By late afternoon, Colton was able to sit up and take some broth. Winona checked his wound and found it looking better than she'd expected. "You're lucky," she told him. "No signs of infection yet." "I've always been lucky," he replied. "Until yesterday, at least." "What happened out there?" "The truth this time." Colton sighed, glancing toward the children who were playing outside within view of the window. "I was transporting gold for the bank in Laramie. Official business, all legal. 3 men ambushed me in the pass near Black Ridge. Highwaymen.
No.
They knew exactly what I was carrying and when I'd be coming through.
It was an inside job." His jaw tightened.
"I got away, but they winged me. They'll be looking." Winona's hands stilled on the bandage she was tying. "Here? They'll come here?" "Maybe. My horse ran a good distance before we reached your place. Might have thrown them off." "But it might not have," Winona said, anger rising in her chest. "You've put my children in danger." I didn't have much choice in where I fell off my horse, madam, Colton replied, his voice edged with the same anger. But you're right. I should go. He started to swing his legs off the settee, then went pale, swaying dangerously. Winona caught his shoulders. Don't be a fool. You can barely sit up. I won't bring trouble to your family. You already have, she snapped, then immediately regretted her harshness when she saw the flash of hurt in his eyes. Just rest a bit longer. If they were going to find you, they would have by now. He didn't look convinced, but he allowed her to ease him back against the cushions. Where's the gold now? She asked.
Hidden.
I stashed it before they caught up to me.
Good.
That's one less thing to worry about. Colton caught her wrist as she turned to leave. Mrs. Parker, Winona, I want you to know I'd never intentionally endanger you or your children. If there's any sign of trouble, I'll be gone before they reach your door. The sincerity in his eyes made her uncomfortable. She'd grown used to distrusting men's promises over the past year. Just focus on healing, Mr. Reed. We'll deal with trouble if it comes. Colton, he corrected.
Please.
She hesitated, then nodded. Colton. That evening, as Winona prepared a simple supper, she kept glancing toward the settee where Colton now sat propped up, Thomas at his feet listening to tales of cattle drives and frontier towns. Despite her misgivings, she couldn't help noticing how her son's face had come alive in a way she hadn't seen since Daniel died. Sadie, too, had overcome her initial fear and was now perched on the arm of the settee, her eyes wide as Colton described a stampede he'd once helped stop. Even Lily had crept closer, though she still kept her distance, watching from behind a chair. Supper's ready, Winona announced, interrupting a story about a boxing match in Dodge City. Mama, can't he finish? Thomas pleaded. Mr. Reed needs to eat to regain his strength, she replied. The story can wait. Colton caught her eye and smiled. Your mama's right. Besides, the best part of that story isn't fit for young ears. Thomas groaned, but helped Colton to the table. Winona noticed he was moving better now, though still favoring his injured side. Supper was livelier than any meal they'd had in months. The children, usually subdued and quiet since their father's death, chattered excitedly, asking Colton endless questions about his life. Winona found herself smiling despite her determination to remain wary. After the meal, as darkness fell, Colton insisted on moving to the porch. Need to check on my horse, he explained, and I should keep watch for a while. You're in no condition to stand guard, Winona protested. I can sit and watch just fine, he replied. Besides, I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. I'll sleep in your barn tonight, and be gone by morning. Don't go, Thomas blurted out. Please, Mr. Reed. You're still hurt. Colton ruffled the boy's hair. I heal fast, son. And I've got responsibilities to attend to. The gold, Winona said quietly. He nodded. It needs to reach Laramie. People are counting on it. You can't even ride yet, she argued. At least stay until you're stronger. Colton studied her, surprise evident in his expression. I thought you were eager to see the back of me. I'm eager to avoid trouble, she corrected. But I won't send an injured man to his death, either. A silence fell between them, broken only by the soft sounds of the children getting ready for bed in the next room. Finally, Colton nodded. 2 more days. Then I'll go, whether I'm fully healed or not. Winona should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt a confusing mixture of emotions she wasn't ready to examine. 2 days, she agreed. Later that night, after the children were asleep and Colton had insisted on bedding down on the porch despite Winona's objections, she found herself standing at the window, watching his shadowy figure. He sat in her rocking chair, shotgun across his lap, staring out into the darkness. Something about his vigilance touched her. He was injured, weak, yet still placing himself between her family and potential danger. It was the sort of thing Daniel would have done. The thought startled her. She'd been so careful not to compare any man to Daniel, knowing none could measure up to the memory of her beloved husband. Yet here she was, finding similarities in this stranger who'd literally fallen at her doorstep. She turned away from the window, troubled by her own thoughts. 2 days. He'd be gone in 2 days, and life would return to its lonely, predictable routine. That was for the best, she told herself firmly. She had 3 children to raise and a farm to run. There was no room in her life for complications, especially not in the form of a handsome, wounded cowboy with secrets and dangerous men on his trail. But as she climbed into her cold, empty bed, Winona couldn't quite convince herself that she believed it. The next morning dawned clear and warm, a perfect late spring day. Winona rose early as always, expecting to find Colton still on the porch. Instead, she discovered him in the barn, examining her plow with a critical eye. "This needs fixing before you can plant," he said without preamble when he noticed her standing in the doorway. "I'm aware," she replied, trying not to sound defensive. The broken plow had been weighing on her mind for weeks. Without it, she couldn't prepare the fields for the corn and beans that would see them through the winter. "I haven't had time to get to town for parts." "You don't need parts," Colton said. "Just some decent smithing. I could fix it for you." Winona crossed her arms. "You're supposed to be resting." "I've rested enough. My side's sore, but I can work." He straightened, wincing slightly. "Consider it payment for your care. You don't owe me anything." "I owe you my life," he said simply. "Let me fix your plow." The practical part of Winona knew she should accept his offer. She had no idea when she'd find time to get to town, and even if she did, repairs would cost money she didn't have to spare. Still, accepting help felt like admitting weakness. Before she could respond, Thomas burst into the barn.
"Mama."
"Mr. Reed, come quick. Riders coming." Winona's heart lurched. "How many?" "3, Thomas replied. "Coming fast from the east." Colton swore under his breath, then immediately apologized. "Get the children inside," he told Winona, already moving toward the barn door. "Hide them if you can." "What are you going to do?" she demanded, following him. "Lead them away from here." He was limping toward his horse, which nickered softly at his approach. "You can barely walk, let alone ride." "I don't have a choice." He grabbed his saddle from where she'd stored it. "These men won't hesitate to hurt you or the children to get what they want." Winona placed herself between him and the horse. "You'll tear your wound open. You'll bleed to death." "Better me than your family," he said, his blue eyes intense. "Now please get inside. I need to know you're safe." Something in his voice, the raw concern, the determination, made her step aside. She watched as he grimaced through the pain of saddling his horse, every movement clearly costing him. "Wait," she said suddenly, a plan forming. "There's another way," she explained quickly as the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. Colton listened, frowning, then shook his head. "Too dangerous. More dangerous than you bleeding to death in the saddle." She touched his arm. "Trust me." Their eyes met, and after a moment he nodded.
"All right."
"But at the first sign of trouble, we'll stick to the plan," she finished for him. "Now hide in the root cellar. Quickly." Minutes later, Winona stood on her porch, shotgun in hand, as 3 dusty riders pulled up in her yard. They were hard-looking men, the kind she'd learned to spot a mile away, mercenary types with cold eyes and permanent sneers. "Morning, madam," the leader called, tipping his hat with mock politeness. He was a tall man with a scar running down one cheek. "Sorry to trouble you, but we're looking for a friend of ours. Might have passed this way yesterday." Tall fella, dark hair, probably injured. Winona kept her expression neutral. "I haven't seen anyone like that." The scarred man exchanged glances with his companions. "You sure about that? He stole something valuable from us. We just want it back." I haven't seen anyone, she repeated firmly. Now, if you don't mind, I have chores to attend to. The man dismounted, his movements lazy but purposeful. Mind if we look around? Our friend's mighty sneaky. Could be hiding somewhere. Winona raised her shotgun slightly. I do mind. This is private property, and you're frightening my children. As if on cue, Thomas appeared in the doorway behind her, his young face set in a scowl that might have been comical under different circumstances. Madam, the scarred man said, his voice hardening, we don't want trouble. But we know Colton Reed came this way. His horse left a clear trail right to your door. The only tracks leading to my door are yours, Winona replied coldly. And I want you to follow them right back out of my yard. The man took another step forward, his hand drifting toward his holstered pistol. I don't think you understand the situation. The crack of a rifle split the air, and dust kicked up inches from the man's boot. All eyes turned toward the ridge behind the house, where a figure on horseback was silhouetted against the morning sky. Next one goes through your head, Sawyer, called a familiar voice, Colton's voice, though Winona knew it couldn't be him. I've got the gold. You want it, come after me. The rider wheeled his horse and disappeared over the ridge. The scarred man, Sawyer, cursed and ran for his horse. That's him. Move. Within seconds, all three men were galloping away, following the mysterious rider over the ridge. Winona waited until they were out of sight, then hurried toward the back of the property, where the root cellar was hidden beneath a small mound covered with wild grass. She opened the heavy wooden door to find Colton crouched inside, his face pale but determined. It worked, she told him. They followed him. Relief washed over his features. Your neighbor came through. Winona nodded. Mr. Hollister, whose farm adjoined hers to the north, had agreed to the ruse immediately when she'd explained the situation. He'd put on Colton's distinctive hat and jacket and led the pursuers away on a false trail that would eventually circle back toward town where, with any luck, they'd encounter the sheriff's patrol. We need to get you back inside before they realize they've been tricked, she said, helping Colton out of the cellar. His shirt was stained with fresh blood, where his wound had reopened. We need to move, he corrected. They'll be back, and angrier than before. You can't travel, Winona argued. And I can't just abandon my farm. Not permanently, Colton said. Just for a few days. Do you have family nearby? Friends you could stay with? She shook her head. My parents are in Missouri. Daniel's family never approved of me. We're alone here. Something flickered in Colton's eyes at that understanding, perhaps, or shared pain. Then we'll have to make a stand, he said. But first, let's get the children somewhere safer. By midday, they had enacted their makeshift plan. The children were hidden in a small cave in the rocky outcropping behind the farm, a place where Thomas and his father used to play at being explorers. Winona had packed food, water, and blankets, instructing the children to stay hidden until she or Colton came for them. What if the bad men find you? Lily had asked, speaking directly to Colton for the first time. Her small face was solemn, her eyes wide with fear. Colton had knelt before her, despite the pain it clearly caused him. They won't, he promised. And even if they did, I wouldn't let them hurt your mama or any of you. I'll never leave you unprotected. That's a promise. Something in the way he said it, the absolute certainty in his voice, had calmed the little girl. She'd nodded gravely and allowed Sadie to lead her deeper into the cave. Now, as afternoon waned, Winona and Colton prepared the farmhouse for the return of Sawyer and his men. They'd barricaded the windows, positioned weapons at strategic points, and moved furniture to create defensive positions. They might not come back, Winona said, more to convince herself than because she believed it. Mr. Hollister could lead them all the way to town. Sawyer's smarter than that, Colton replied, checking the load in one of Daniel's old pistols. He'll figure out the ruse eventually. And when he does, he'll be twice as dangerous. Why does he want the gold so badly? Is it really worth killing for? Colton's expression darkened. It's not just any gold. It's the peril for the miners in South Pass City. Without it, 100 families won't eat this month. He sighed, setting down the pistol. That's why I can't just let it go. Those people are counting on that money. Winona studied him in the fading light. You're not just a courier, are you? He met her gaze steadily. I'm a federal marshal. I was escorting the payroll when Sawyer and his gang ambushed me. They knew exactly when and where I'd be, which means there's an informant somewhere in the system. A marshal, she repeated, oddly unsurprised. It explained his air of authority, his skill with weapons, the way he carried himself. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Habit, he admitted. In my line of work, it's sometimes safer if people don't know who I am. And honestly, I wasn't sure I could trust you at first. And now... A smile touched his lips. Now I'd trust you with my life. Already have, in fact. The simple statement warmed her more than it should have. She turned away, focusing on loading her shotgun. How many men do you think Sawyer has? Just the 2 we saw.
Probably.
He doesn't like to split the take too many ways. Colton moved to the window, peering out at the darkening landscape. They'll come at night. Try to catch us sleeping. Then we won't sleep, Winona said firmly. They settled in for a long night, taking turns watching at the windows while the other rested. Colton insisted on taking the first watch, though Winona could see the pain lines around his mouth deepening as the evening progressed. You should let me check your wound, she said around midnight, bringing him a cup of coffee. It's fine, he said automatically. She gave him a stern look. You're a terrible liar, Marshal Reed. That earned her a rueful smile. So, I've been told. He set down his rifle, and it allowed her to examine the bandage, which was indeed soaked through with blood. You've reopened it completely, she scolded, gathering fresh bandages. At this rate, you'll bleed to death before Sawyer even gets here. Been through worse, he said, but he submitted to her ministrations, only hissing slightly when she cleaned the wound with whiskey. As she worked, Winona found herself acutely aware of his proximity, of the steady rise and fall of his chest beneath her hands, of the warmth of his skin. It had been so long since she'd been this close to a man, not since Daniel. The realization both startled and unsettled her. You're good at this, Colton said softly. Doctoring, I mean. Necessity, she replied, focusing on the bandage. When you live this far from town, you learn to handle things yourself. Your husband was lucky to have you. She glanced up, surprised by the comment. I was lucky to have him, she corrected. Daniel was a good man. The best I've ever known. He must have been, Colton agreed. To have earned the love of a woman like you. Winona felt her cheeks warm. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? It's the truth. Because. She hesitated, unsure how to explain the complicated emotions his words stirred in her. Because it doesn't matter. You'll be gone soon, back to your life as a marshal. I'll be here with my children and my farm. That's all there is to it. Colton caught her hand as she finished tying the bandage. Is it? Is that really all there is? Their eyes met, and for a moment, Winona couldn't breathe. There was something in his gaze, something warm and inviting and frightening all at once. The moment was shattered by the sound of breaking glass from the back of the house. They're here, Colton whispered, reaching for his rifle. Get down. The next hours passed in a blur of gunfire and shouted threats. Sawyer and his men had surrounded the house, firing sporadically from different positions to keep them pinned down and guessing. They're trying to wear us down, Colton explained as they crouched behind the overturned table. Save your ammunition. Only shoot when you have a clear target. Winona nodded, her hands steady on her shotgun despite her pounding heart. She'd never been in a gunfight before, but she'd always been a good shot. Daniel had made sure of that. Where's the gold, Reed? Sawyer shouted from somewhere in the darkness. Give it up, and maybe we'll let the woman live. Go to hell, Sawyer.
Colton called back.
You want the gold, come and take it. More shots rang out, splintering the window frame above them. Winona ducked lower, fear for her children overwhelming her momentarily. What if the men found the cave? What if Thomas tried to be brave and confronted them? As if sensing her thoughts, Colton touched her arm. They're safe, he said quietly. Thomas knows to keep his sisters hidden. She nodded, grateful for his reassurance. What's our plan? Wait them out, he replied. They'll get impatient eventually. Make a mistake. And if they don't? Colton's expression hardened. Then I'll give them what they want. The gold. Winona asked, confused. But you said, not the gold, he cut her off.
Me.
If it comes to it, I'll surrender myself to draw them away from you and the children. No, she said firmly. I won't let you sacrifice yourself. It's not your decision, he replied, his tone gentle but unyielding. Protecting innocent people is my job. It's what I signed up for. And what about the miners? Their families? You said they need that gold. Colton's jaw tightened. Some things are more important than money. The way he looked at her as he said it made her heart skip a beat. Before she could respond, another volley of shots hit the house, one bullet passing so close to her head that she felt the disturbance in the air. That's it, Colton muttered, shifting position. I'm ending this. What are you doing? Winona hissed as he moved toward the door. Creating a distraction, he replied. When I give the signal, I want you to run out the back way. Head for the cave, stay with the children. And leave you? Not a chance. Winona, no, she cut him off. We stick together. That's the plan. Their argument was interrupted by a new sound hoofbeats, many of them approaching fast. Shouts filled the air, followed by more gunfire, but this time it seemed to be directed away from the house. What's happening? Winona whispered. Colton crawled to the window and peered out carefully. A slow smile spread across his face. Cavalry, he said. Looks like Hollister made it to town after all. Sure enough, when they cautiously opened the door minutes later, they found Sawyer and his men in custody, surrounded by a detachment of soldiers from the nearby fort and the town sheriff. Marshal Reed, the sheriff greeted, touching his hat. Heard you might need some assistance. Mr. Hollister here told us quite a tale. Relief washed over Winona as she spotted her neighbor among the group. He looked none the worse for wear, though his horse seemed exhausted. Perfect timing, Sheriff, Colton replied, leaning heavily against the doorframe. The excitement of the shootout had clearly taken its toll on his wounded body. I believe you'll find these men wanted for robbery and attempted murder, among other charges. As the soldiers led the prisoners away, Winona turned to Colton. It's over, she said, hardly believing it herself. He nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. It's over, he agreed. You and the children are safe now. And the gold. Still hidden where I left it. I'll retrieve it tomorrow and complete my mission. Tomorrow, she repeated, feeling a strange hollowness at the word. Tomorrow he would leave, riding out of their lives as suddenly as he had entered them. It was what she had wanted from the beginning, wasn't it? Before she could examine the question too closely, she remembered the children. I need to get Thomas and the girls, she said. They must be terrified. I'll come with you, Colton offered, pushing himself away from the doorframe. You should rest, she protested. You've reopened your wound again. I made a promise to Lily, he reminded her. I told her I'd never leave them unprotected. I don't break my promises, Winona. Something in his voice, a depth of sincerity that couldn't be faked, made her throat tighten with emotion. All right, she said softly. We'll go together. They made their way slowly to the cave, Colton leaning on her more heavily with each step. By the time they reached the rocky outcropping, he was pale and sweating, but he refused to stop. Thomas? Winona called as they approached the hidden entrance. Sadie? Lily? It's safe to come out now. For a moment, there was silence. Then Thomas's voice, cautious but hopeful. Mama? Is it really you? Yes, sweetheart. The bad men are gone. You can come out now. The children emerged one by one, blinking in the early morning light. Thomas first, then Sadie, and finally Lily, who launched herself at Colton the moment she spotted him. You came back, she cried, wrapping her small arms around his waist. Colton winced at the impact, but returned the embrace gently. I promised I would, didn't I? Are you hurt bad? Thomas asked, noticing the fresh blood on Colton's shirt. Nothing that won't heal, Colton assured him, ruffling the boy's hair. Your mama's a fine doctor. Did you shoot the bad men? Sadie wanted to know, her eyes wide. No, Winona answered firmly. The sheriff took them away. There was no need for more shooting. As they walked back to the house, the children clustered around Colton, asking endless questions about the gunfight, the soldiers, the prisoners. Winona watched with a mixture of joy and apprehension. They had attached themselves to him so quickly, so completely. What would happen tomorrow when he rode away? By the time they reached the house, Colton could barely stand. The sheriff and Mr. Hollister had departed, leaving only a young soldier to stand guard in case any of Sawyer's associates were still in the area. Bed, Winona ordered, guiding Colton toward her room. No arguments. For once, he didn't protest, allowing her to help him onto the mattress. Just for a few hours, he murmured as his eyes drifted closed. Need to get the gold. The gold can wait, she replied, but he was already asleep. She watched him for a moment, this strange, brave man who had tumbled into their lives and changed everything in the space of 2 days. Then she turned away, pulling the door closed behind her, and went to prepare breakfast for her hungry children. The day passed quietly. Colton slept through most of it, his body demanding rest to heal from his wounds and the exertion of the gunfight. The children played outside, their voices carrying through the open windows, lighter and more carefree than Winona had heard in months. Late in the afternoon, as she was preparing supper, she heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Colton standing in the doorway, looking rumpled but considerably stronger than before. You should still be resting, she admonished, though without much conviction. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough, he replied. I need to retrieve the gold and report to my superiors. They'll be wondering what happened to me. Of course, Winona said, turning back to the stove to hide the sudden sting of tears in her eyes. Foolish, she told herself. She'd known all along he would leave. Will you at least stay for supper? The children would be disappointed if you left without saying goodbye. I'd like that, he said softly. Thank you. Supper was a subdued affair. The children seemed to sense that Colton would be leaving soon, and even Thomas's usual chatter was muted. Lily kept watching Colton with solemn eyes, as if memorizing his features. After they'd eaten, Colton cleared his throat. I have something I need to tell you all, he began. I have to leave tomorrow to finish my job. There are people counting on me. Because you're a marshal, Thomas said, surprising the adults. At their startled looks, he shrugged. I heard you and Mama talking last night. That's right, Colton acknowledged. I'm a marshal, and I have duties I can't ignore. Will you come back? Sadie asked, her lower lip trembling. Colton glanced at Winona, something uncertain in his expression. I'd like to, he said carefully, if your mama wouldn't mind. All eyes turned to Winona, who found herself at a loss for words. The truth was, she didn't want him to leave at all, a realization that both frightened and exhilarated her. In just 2 days, this man had awakened feelings she thought died with Daniel, feelings of safety, of possibility, of hope. I think we'd all like that, she finally managed. The smile that spread across Colton's face was like sunshine after a storm. Then I'll come back, he promised. As soon as my business is concluded. Later, after the children were in bed, Winona found Colton on the porch, staring up at the stars. She sat beside him on the step, close enough to feel the warmth of his body, but not quite touching.
"Did you mean it?" she asked.
About coming back? He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I never say things I don't mean, Winona. Especially not to you." "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Why would you want to come back to this place? To us?" Colton was silent for a long moment, his gaze steady on her face. "Because in all my years of wandering, I've never felt as at home as I have these past 2 days. Because your children have somehow worked their way into my heart so completely it frightens me. And because when I look at you, I see everything I never knew I wanted." Winona's breath caught. "You can't possibly know that.
"We've only just met."
"Some things you just know," he replied simply. "I knew at the moment I opened my eyes and saw you leaning over me, determination in every line of your face even though you were clearly terrified. I knew it when I watched you with your children, fierce as a mother bear but gentle as a summer breeze. I knew it when you stood beside me against Sawyer, unafraid, unwavering." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I'm not asking for promises, Winona. I know you're still grieving Daniel. I know the children come first as they should. All I'm asking is for a chance to come back and see where this might lead." Tears pricked at her eyes. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not of you, but of feeling again. Of risking again." "I know," he said gently. "Believe me, I know. My wife died 6 years ago.
"Cholera."
I never thought I'd want to open myself up to that kind of pain again." "Your wife?" Winona echoed, surprised. "You never mentioned." "It's not something I talk about easily," he explained. "Rebecca was everything to me. After she died, I threw myself into my work, moved from town to town, taking the most dangerous assignments. I didn't care much what happened to me. And now," a small smile touched his lips, "now I find myself caring very much about what happens to me. About what happens to you and those 3 remarkable children." Winona found herself leaning toward him, drawn by the sincerity in his voice, the warmth in his eyes. "I think," she said slowly, "that I would like you to come back, Colton Reed." "Then I will," he promised. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." The following morning dawned clear and beautiful. Colton, true to his word, prepared to depart after breakfast. The children gathered around him, extracting countless promises that he would come back soon, that he would bring them stories of his journey, that he would teach Thomas to rope a steer when he returned. "I'll be back before you know it," he assured them, kneeling to accept Lily's fierce hug. "You take care of your mama while I'm gone, all right?" The little girl nodded solemnly. "Will you bring me a present, Lily?" Winona admonished, embarrassed by her daughter's directness. But Colton just laughed. "I certainly will. The prettiest thing I can find." He stood and turned to Winona, suddenly awkward. "I guess this is goodbye for now." "For now," she agreed, trying to keep her voice steady. He hesitated, then leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." Then he was mounting his horse, waving one last time to the children, and riding away down the dusty road. Winona watched until he disappeared from sight, her hand pressed to her cheek where she could still feel the warmth of his lips. "Will he really come back, Mama?" Sadie asked, slipping her small hand into Winona's. "Yes," Winona replied, surprising herself with her certainty. "I believe he will." 2 weeks passed with no word from Colton. Winona tried not to worry, reminding herself that his duties as a marshal might take him far afield. The children asked about him constantly, looking up hopefully whenever they heard approaching hoofbeats. In the meantime, life continued. The plow remained broken, but Mr. Hollister, grateful for their role in capturing Sawyer's gang, helped Winona prepare a small portion of her fields for planting. It wouldn't be enough for a full harvest, but it would keep them fed through the winter, if they were careful. Then, one evening as Winona was hanging laundry while the children fed the chickens, the sound of wagon wheels caught her attention. She turned to see a large wagon coming up the road, driven by a familiar figure. "It's Mr. Reed," Thomas shouted, already running toward the approaching vehicle. "He's back." Winona's heart leaped as she recognized Colton at the reins. He looked different somehow, cleanly shaved, wearing a new shirt, his hat set at a jaunty angle. But it was the smile that spread across his face when he spotted her that truly transformed him. "Told you I'd be back," he called as he pulled the wagon to a stop. The children swarmed around him, talking all at once, while Winona approached more slowly, suddenly shy. "We were beginning to wonder," she said. "Had some business to attend to," he explained, lifting Lily into his arms. "Important business." "Did you catch more bad men?" Thomas asked eagerly. "Something like that," Colton replied with a mysterious smile. "But more importantly, I brought supplies." He gestured to the wagon, which Winona now saw was loaded with crates and sacks. Seed for planting, tools, some things for the house, and he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in tissue paper, which he handed to Lily, a present for a certain young lady. Lily unwrapped it carefully to reveal a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Open it," Colton encouraged. Inside was a tiny portrait of a woman with Lily's same solemn eyes. "Who is she?" the little girl asked. "That's your mama," Colton explained. "I had it done from a photograph I found in town. The photographer remembered when your parents had their wedding portraits taken." Tears filled Winona's eyes. It was such a thoughtful gift, not a trinket, but something meaningful that connected Lily to her father's memory. "Thank you," she whispered. Colton's eyes met hers over Lily's head. "I have something for you too," he said quietly. "But it can wait until later." The rest of the day was spent unloading the wagon. Colton had brought far more than just seeds and tools. There were bolts of fabric for new clothes, books for the children, a repaired plow that looked better than new, and countless other items that Winona had done without for months. "How did you afford all this?" she asked as they carried the last of the supplies into the house. "The miners in South Pass City took up a collection when they heard what happened," Colton explained. "They wanted to thank you for helping me deliver their payroll." And he hesitated. "I used some of my savings. I've been drawing a marshal's salary for years with nothing to spend it on." "I can't accept all this," Winona protested. "You can," he countered. "And you will. Consider it an investment in our future." She looked up sharply at that. "Our future?" Colton set down the crate he was carrying and turned to face her fully. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. The real reason I was gone so long." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded paper, which he handed to her. Winona opened it curiously. "A deed?" she asked, confused. "To the Wilson place," he confirmed. "The property that borders yours to the south. It came up for sale and I bought it." Winona stared at him, astonished. "You bought land? Here?" Colton nodded, a hint of uncertainty in his expression for the first time. "I resigned my commission as a marshal," he said. "Turned in my badge. I'm going to be a rancher now. If that meets with your approval." "You gave up being a marshal?" Winona couldn't quite wrap her mind around it. "But you loved your work." "I loved the purpose it gave me," he corrected. "The feeling that I was doing something worthwhile. But I've found a new purpose now." He took a step closer to her. "These past 2 weeks, all I could think about was getting back here. To you. To the children." He took her hands in his. "I know it's fast, Winona. I know you might not be ready. But I had to show you I was serious. That this wasn't just words or promises. I'm here to stay if you'll have me." Winona looked into his eyes and saw everything she'd been afraid to hope for: steadfastness, sincerity, and a love so clear it took her breath away. "The children will be overjoyed," she said softly. And their mother? Colton asked, his voice barely above a whisper. In answer, Winona rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, hesitant, but quickly deepened as Colton wrapped his arms around her, drawing her close against him. When they finally parted, both breathless, Winona rested her forehead against his chest. I never thought I'd feel this way again, she admitted. After Daniel died, I was sure that part of my life was over. I felt the same after Rebecca, Colton said, stroking her hair. It's frightening, isn't it? Opening herself up again, knowing what it feels like to lose someone you love. Terrifying, she agreed. But somehow, not as terrifying as the thought of never feeling this way again. He tilted her face up to his. I can't promise we won't face hardships, Winona. Life out here is never easy. But I can promise that you and the children will never have to face those hardships alone. Not while I'm breathing. I believe you, she said simply, and realized it was true. In the short time she'd known him, Colton Reed had proven himself a man of his word in every way that mattered.
Nana.
Thomas's voice came from the doorway. Are you and Mr. Reed going to get married? Winona turned, blushing, to find all three children watching them with varying expressions of interest and approval. Well, Colton said, his arms still around Winona's waist, I haven't actually asked her yet, son. Are you going to? Sadie pressed, bouncing on her toes with excitement. Colton looked down at Winona, a question in his eyes. She nodded almost imperceptibly, her heart too full for words. As a matter of fact, he said, turning back to the children with a broad smile, I think I am. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold and crimson, Colton Reed asked Winona Parker to be his wife. They sat on the porch swing, the children already asleep inside, the night air sweet with the scent of spring blossoms. I don't have a ring yet, he apologized. I wanted to ask you first, to be sure. I don't need a ring, Winona replied, leaning against his shoulder. Just your promise. You have that, he assured her. Always and forever. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day with leaves crunching underfoot and the scent of apple cider in the air, they were married in the small church in town. Thomas stood proudly beside Colton as his best man, while Sadie and Lily scattered wildflower petals along the aisle. As Winona walked toward her future husband, she caught sight of her children's faces. Thomas, solemn and trying so hard to be grown up, Sadie, practically vibrating with excitement, and Lily, her eyes shining with a joy Winona hadn't seen since before Daniel's death. They had come so far from those dark days after losing Daniel, when the children had withdrawn into themselves, fearful of every stranger, every new face that might disappear from their lives as suddenly as their father had. Now they bloomed under Colton's steady presence, his unwavering affection, his kept promises. I'll never leave you, he had told Lily that night when Sawyer's gang had threatened their home. It was a simple phrase, but it had unlocked something in all of them, the courage to trust again, to love again, to believe in the possibility of happiness. As Winona took Colton's hand before the altar, she knew with absolute certainty that he would keep that promise. Not because life was predictable or safe, it never would be, especially in this wild, untamed country, but because he was a man who understood the value of commitment, the sanctity of his word. I do, she said when the moment came, her voice clear and steady despite the tears in her eyes. I do, Colton echoed, squeezing her hands gently. And as their lips met to seal their vows, Winona felt the last of her fears dissolve. The future stretched before them, uncertain in its details, but secure in its foundations. Together, they would build something lasting on the wild frontier, a home, a family, a legacy of love that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Colton traced the curve of Winona's cheek with gentle fingers. Happy, he whispered. More than I ever thought possible, she admitted, nestling closer to him. Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed in such a short time. 6 months ago, I was alone, struggling to keep the farm going, watching my children withdraw further into themselves each day. And now, she smiled in the darkness. Now Thomas talks about becoming a rancher like his pa. Sadie sings again, all day long sometimes. And Lily. She paused, thinking of her youngest, who had been hit hardest by Daniel's death. Lily laughs. Really laughs, from deep inside. She's not afraid anymore. None of you have to be afraid, Colton murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Not while I'm here. I know, Winona said simply, and in those 2 words was a lifetime of trust. 2 years later, their family grew with the arrival of a daughter they named Hope. She was born on a summer morning, with sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows and her siblings hovering anxiously in the doorway until they were allowed in to meet their new sister. She's so tiny, Thomas marveled, now 12 and growing tall like his stepfather. She's perfect, Colton declared, cradling the infant with a tenderness that made Winona's heart swell. As she watched her husband with their daughter, Winona reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first night when a wounded stranger had collapsed at her door, to the gunfight that had cemented their bond, to the quiet morning when Colton had knelt in the newly plowed field of their combined properties and asked her to be his wife, every step had led them here, to this family they had built together. The Parker Reed Ranch, as it became known, flourished under their joint care. Colton's experience from his traveling days proved invaluable as he introduced new breeding stock and farming techniques. Winona's practical knowledge of the land complemented his vision perfectly. The children thrived in the stability of their blended family. Thomas grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's kindness and his stepfather's steady determination. Sadie discovered a talent for training horses, spending hours in the corral with the gentler Mares. And Lily, once so withdrawn and fearful, became the storyteller of the family, weaving tales that entertained them on long winter evenings. Baby Hope was joined 2 years later by a brother they named Daniel, in honor of the man whose love had shaped the beginning of their family story. Colton had suggested the name himself, understanding that remembering Daniel wasn't a diminishment of what they had built together, but rather an acknowledgement of the foundation upon which their happiness rested. He'll always be part of who you are, Colton had said when Winona expressed surprise at his suggestion. Part of who the children are. I'd never want to change that. It was this generosity of spirit, this capacity to love without jealousy or conditions, that confirmed for Winona what she had sensed from the beginning, that in Colton Reed, she had found not just a protector or a provider, but a true partner in every sense of the word. As the years passed, their reputation in the territory grew. The Parker Reed Ranch became known not only for its fine cattle and bountiful harvests, but also for its hospitality. Travelers, settlers, and even the occasional lost soul found welcome at their table, a tradition that began with the wounded marshal seeking refuge and continued as a testament to the power of opening one's heart to unexpected possibilities. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Winona and Colton would sit on the porch swing where he had proposed, watching the stars emerge above the land they had nurtured together. Do you ever miss it? She asked him once. The excitement of being a marshal, the adventures on the trail? Colton considered the question seriously, as he did all things. Sometimes I miss the clarity of it, he admitted. Knowing exactly who the bad guys were, having a clear mission. Life is messier than that, especially raising children. He smiled, taking her hand in his. But no, I don't miss the loneliness. The emptiness of coming back to a rented room in some dusty town. The feeling that nothing I did really mattered beyond the moment. He brought her fingers to his lips. What I have now, what we've built together, it matters.
It lasts.
That's worth more than all the adventures in the world. Winona leaned against his shoulder, content in the knowledge that they had found in each other exactly what they needed. Not perfect people, but perfect partners for the journey they shared. On Thomas's 16th birthday, as the family gathered to celebrate, Winona found herself watching Colton with their youngest children. Hope, now 4, sat perched on his shoulders, while 2-year-old Daniel clung to his leg, both children laughing as their father pretended to be weighed down by their enormous presence. "He's a good man," a voice said beside her, and Winona turned to find Lily, now 14 and growing into a beauty, observing the scene with a thoughtful expression. "Yes," Winona agreed. "He is." Lily was quiet for a moment, then said, "I remember, that night when the bad men came and we were hiding in the cave. I was so scared, thinking you might not come back. That we'd be alone again, like after Papa died." Winona put an arm around her daughter's shoulders, pulling her close. "I remember too. But then he came with you to get us," Lily continued. "And he knelt down, even though he was hurt, and promised he'd never leave us unprotected." She looked up at her mother, her eyes wise beyond her years. "That's when I knew we'd be okay. Because he meant it." "He did," Winona confirmed, her throat tight with emotion. "He's kept that promise every day since." "I'm glad he found us," Lily said simply. "Or that we found him, however it happened." Winona smiled, watching as Hope now demanded to be swung around while Daniel jumped up and down begging for his turn. "So am I, sweetheart. So am I." Later that night, after the celebration had ended and the younger children were in bed, Winona shared Lily's words with Colton as they sat by the fire. "She remembers that?" he asked, surprised. "She was so young." "Children remember the moments that changed their world," Winona replied. "Your promise changed hers." Colton was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "I meant every word," he finally said. "From the moment I saw those 3 solemn little faces watching me with such caution, such fear, I knew I'd do anything to make them feel safe again." "You did more than make them feel safe," Winona said, taking his hand. "You taught them to trust again, to believe in promises, to know that not everyone leaves. Some things are worth staying for," he said simply, drawing her close against his side. As the years continued to pass, the Parker Reed family weathered the trials that came their way with the same resilience that had brought them together. There were drought years when the crops failed, winters so harsh they lost livestock, and the inevitable conflicts that arise in any family. But through it all, they remained united, their bonds strengthened by each challenge overcome. Thomas, at 18, decided to attend the university back east, his mind set on bringing new agricultural techniques to their ranch. Sadie, at 16, had become known throughout the territory for her way with even the most difficult horses. Lily, quiet but determined, discovered a passion for teaching and began assisting at the local schoolhouse. Hope and Daniel, growing up in the security of their parents' unwavering love, developed the confidence and curiosity that Winona had always hoped for her children. They explored the ranch fearlessly, secure in the knowledge that home was always a safe harbor, no matter how far they roamed. On their 10th anniversary, Colton surprised Winona with a trip to San Francisco, a city she had always dreamed of visiting, but never thought she would see. They left the ranch in Thomas's capable hands. He was home from university for the summer, and embarked on a journey that reminded them both of the wider world beyond their beloved homestead. "It's beautiful," Winona marveled as they stood on a hill overlooking the bay, the city spread out before them in a tapestry of buildings and bustling activity. "Grander than I imagined." "Worth the wait?" Colton asked, his arm around her waist. She turned to look at him, this man who had changed everything with his arrival in their lives. His hair was touched with silver now at the temples, and lines of laughter framed his eyes, but he was still as handsome to her as the day he'd first awakened on her settee and looked at her with those startlingly blue eyes. Yes, she said, meaning far more than the city view. Everything has been worth the wait. That night, in their hotel room with its fine furnishings and view of the bay, Colton presented her with a small velvet box. Inside was a gold locket, similar to the one he had given Lily years before, but larger and more ornate. "Open it," he urged, just as he had with their daughter on that long-ago day. Winona did, and found inside a miniature family portrait, all of them together on the porch of their home, captured by a traveling photographer who had stayed with them the previous summer. "Our family," Colton said simply. "All of us together." Tears filled Winona's eyes as she traced the tiny faces with her fingertip. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Like the life we've built," he agreed, gathering her close. "Not without its challenges, but perfect in all the ways that matter." As they held each other in the soft darkness, Winona reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them to this moment. From a widow alone with 3 frightened children to the matriarch of a thriving family. From a wounded marshal with a dangerous mission to a respected rancher with deep roots in the community. It had all begun with a desperate ride through the night, a gunshot in the darkness, and a promise made to a frightened little girl. "I'll never leave you." Some promises, Winona knew, were meant to be kept for a lifetime. And this one, spoken in their darkest hour, had become the foundation upon which they had built a life filled with love, trust, and the quiet joy of belonging to each other. "What are you thinking about?" Colton murmured, his lips against her hair. "About how sometimes the things we fear the most turn out to be blessings in disguise," she replied. "I was so afraid when you showed up at our door that night. Afraid of strangers, afraid of change, afraid of feeling anything again after losing Daniel. And now—" She smiled in the darkness, her heart full to overflowing with the life they had created together. "Now I know that some strangers become family, that change can heal as well as hurt, and that the heart is capable of loving deeply more than once in a lifetime." Colton tightened his arms around her. "I'm grateful every day that you took a chance on me," he said. "On us." "So am I," Winona replied, knowing with absolute certainty that the frightened widow she had once been would approve of the woman she had become, stronger, braver, and infinitely more joyful for having opened her door to a wounded stranger on that fateful night so many years ago. As they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's arms far from the home they had built together, Winona carried with her the knowledge that no matter where life took them in the years ahead, they would face it as they had faced everything since that first desperate night. Together, united by a love that had begun with a promise and grown into a legacy that would sustain their family for generations to come. In the end, she reflected drowsily, it wasn't gold or land or even safety that had truly transformed their lives. It was the courage to trust again, to believe, to love without reservation, even knowing the risks. That was the real treasure Colton Reed had brought to her door that night, not in his saddlebags or his marshal's badge, but in his unwavering commitment to the promise he had made to 3 frightened children and their wary mother. "I'll never leave you." And he never did.